7:33, close enough. Actually, I'm gonna try to hurry us along, so we may have a chance of getting out of here before the rain meets us. I don't know, we'll make it our goal. Anyway. President of the University of Lowbrow, most of you probably know that. You found your way into the May meeting already. And as tradition would have it, we're going to have our speaker first. In the event that anybody didn't want to stick around for our enlightening business meeting, we might let you escape. So we have a couple of officers here, well, probably more than two. Anyway, we'll get reports from them if they have some after our speaker talks to us. And our speaker tonight is a repeat speaker that, geez, this is what, your fourth, fifth, sixth?
I counted them up the other day.
Lost count. 6 times now. This is the 6th. Got it. All of them really great. In fact, as recently as last year, he spoke to us. He is a graduate from the University of Michigan in 1960 with a degree in engineering physics. He spent 2 years as an artillery officer in the U.S. Army in Germany and worked for 36 years at General Motors as a vehicle development engineer manager, specializing in acoustics, noise, and vibration. He retired in 1999. In his spare time, he wrote and recorded music for Epic and Roulette Records as one of the Ski Brothers. And he even appeared, see how people remember this, Dick Clark's American Bandstand.
I think it's.
Thanks. And that was back in 1958, by the way. That's why I wondered if anybody remembered. Probably did. Upon his retirement, Jim rekindled a lifelong interest in astronomy and joined the Warren Astronomical Society. His interests include observing and outreach, and he owns several telescopes. But in recent years, his passion for astronomical history and technology has become a major focus. He belongs to a number of astronomy clubs in Michigan and Arizona, and of course, including the Lowbrows. And he is currently treasurer of the Matt Holbrook's Astronomical Society. And by the way, he's going to give us a little report on the latest from that when he's done with his main talk. He has visited a number of major observatories, and in March 2009, earned a certificate for observing 104 Messier objects in one night at the All Arizona Messier Marathon. So with that, Jim Shedlowski.
Welcome, fellow Lowbrow members. Is the microphone on, by the way? I don't know if that's working in here or out out in the ether.
Well, we're not hearing the speakers.
Okay. Well, if I'm not loud enough, give me a.
Yeah, because we turned it on.
Are we online?
Yeah.
Should be. So go ahead and talk, Jim.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I don't see any ladies here, so. Good evening, fellow members. Welcome to an updated version of my presentation last September at Cranbrook Institute of Science to the Warren Astronomical Society, which has been an annual habit of mine for almost 23 years now. Later last year, I picked a topic which may seem to some of you to be a bit obscure. So I would like to ask everybody in the room here to pretend you did not read the abstract for this presentation. Good. And answer this question. Do you know who Russell Williams Porter was? If so, raise your hands. Oh, we got a couple of folks here. If you do, I'm sure it's because of a couple of things related to astronomy. But this presentation will tell the story of the interesting life of this fascinating man who, as we shall see, among his many accomplishments, is largely responsible for the popularity of amateur astronomy in the United States as we now know it. A modest man with an innate curiosity matched by a unique ability to find creative solutions to challenges, and then to communicate them effectively by physical example, by his artistic abilities, or by his words. Porter profoundly affected the lives of many. Porter was born in Springfield, Vermont in 1871, an interesting age of change. It was shortly after the Civil War. Transcontinental Railroad had just been completed just 2 years earlier in 1869. Levi's were born in 1871. Telephones were still 5 years in the future. Electric lighting came about in 1880 when Edison patented his incandescent lamp. The USA had just become recognized as a world leader in technology and industry. Porter grew up in Springfield, Vermont, a small town with a population of about 3,000, which was developing into a machine tool center, largely because of the water power from the Black River Falls in the middle of town. As a youngster in school, he was undistinguished except for his inquisitive nature and a demonstrated talent in art. Porter's higher education was varied, and he never earned, if you will, a degree from any of the several colleges that he attended. After a brief stint at the University of Vermont in 1890 and 91, studying civil engineering, he was forced by financial circumstances to relocate to Boston to gain employment, and where he enrolled in MIT in 1892 in their architecture program with art study on the side. He was to pursue architecture at MIT on and off for more than 5 years, and while never graduating, he would later teach architecture classes at MIT from 1915 to 1918. His educational continuity, if you will, was disrupted in the fall of 1892 when he attended a lecture at MIT by Robert E. Peary, who was raising funds to continue his explorations in the Arctic, which eventually resulted in his 1909 claim to have been the first man to have reached the North Pole. Porter was fascinated. He said, quote, "Out of the clear sky that evening came to me the undefiable lure known as Arctic fever. All I knew was that nothing would stop me until I'd gone to the north," end of quote. Thus began an 11-year period in which Porter participated in 6 Arctic expeditions, during which he learned many survival skills while contributing to these exploration efforts with his emerging talents as an artist, surveyor, map maker, scientist, and astronomer. Between these expeditions, he would return to Boston to his studies at MIT and an always waiting job at the architectural firm of Codman and Desperado. This important and extended phase of Porter's life is described in his biography, but are more captured in detail. I have a copy of his biography here. Any of you would like to look at it after the meeting? And also, the next one I'm going to describe, which just in words and many examples of his wonderful drawings and paintings, which describe the life and adventures of early Arctic exploration in his book, The Arctic Diary of Russell Porter. This volume here, which it's a wonderful book if you ever get a chance to look through it. It has a lot of his paintings and drawings and stuff like that, but also the story of his life, both in the Arctic and later on. In his book, The Arctic Diary of Russell Williams Porter, his original journal notes and records of scientific observations, along with hundreds of pencil sketches, oil and watercolor painting, pastels, pen and ink drawings, are also part of the National Archives in the Center for Polar Archives in Washington. They represent some of the most valuable graphic records of the Arctic for this early period of pioneering exploration. During his travels, he became acquainted with the indigenous natives of the Arctic and accurately portrayed them, many for the first time. His artistic talents ingratiated them to him, and friendships developed, which helped him through many difficult situations during his Arctic adventures. His travels often involved ships in the Arctic ice, which resulted in several shipwrecks. On his last expedition, the Fiala-Ziegler Polar Expedition in 1903 to 1905, he was stranded along with 40 shipmates, for 2.5 years on the northern group of islands in the Eastern Hemisphere at 81 degrees north latitude, because the ice had crushed their transport ships. The America. This ordeal included two 130-day winters of darkness without a sunrise. And remember, this was 1903. There was no communication system with the outside world. His many adventures included dealing with the Arctic isolation, bitter temperatures, depending upon dog sled transport, and often living off the land. He was also involved with the planning, logistics, and leadership of these expeditions, learning many skills about dealing with people and problems under often extreme circumstances. The top center photo of this slide describes his encounter with a polar bear while sketching at 30 degrees below zero and finding out that his Winchester was frozen. Try to see if I can find my cursor here. Probably on that screen, I guess. Ah, here we go. Okay, this photo here. He developed many life skills during these experiences, but his primary responsibilities on most of these expeditions, in addition to his artistic records, involved scientific work, which would come to influence the rest of his life in a profound manner. It involved the accurate measurements and recording of the time and location of the exploration parties by the only available method at that time, celestial navigation or astronomy. These measurements enabled the explorers to know where they were at, to guide their travels to unknown territories, and to create maps of these new territories. Porter became a very competent surveyor and cartographer, and knowledgeable about the optical tools used. One of his most important instruments was a precision transit telescope known as a resolved circle, designed to measure altitude and azimuth to within 4 seconds of arc. He built an observatory at Camp Abruzzi in Franz Joseph Island, about 560 miles from the North Pole. Excuse me. And it was at this forlorn location that Porter spent 2.5 years stranded. With this instrument, he recorded hundreds of star transits and occultations through the long winter nights. He marveled that this device, barely a foot square, allowed him to locate himself on the Earth's surface to within a few feet of the actual truth. It's like a 19th century GPS, if you will. Understanding the principles behind these instruments and the mechanisms and mathematics involved with them became a passion for Porter. They all involved the manipulation and use of light to acquire the precision of the universe. By 1906, Porter, now 35 years old, put his Arctic fever behind him and began searching for a new chapter in his life. His life experiences and curious nature had trained him to be a quite talented, artistically, well-versed in architecture, a knowledgeable engineer, and his innate curiosity now sought a new challenge. As he looked for a new home, he was drawn by his emotional attachment to the sea, and in the fall of 1906, he purchased a home and 50 acres at Port Clyde on the coast of Maine, only 4 hours and 200 miles north of Boston. He also married Port Clyde's postmistress. His initial intent was to create an art colony and was succeeded by attempts at farming, surveying, and selling some of his artwork. Using his architectural skills, he designed and built 14 cottages, which he first rented and then sold. But in 1910, Porter embarked on another journey, which was to consume the rest of his life and which was initiated by a friend from his old hometown in Springfield, Vermont, James Harkness. Harkness was an American business executive, mechanical engineer, inventor, entrepreneur, and president of the Jones and Lamson Machine Tool Company in Springfield, Vermont. Porter's hometown. He was a Renaissance man, having learned to fly in 1914 on a Wright Flyer. He also went on to become the 58th governor of Vermont. A man of some means, Harkness was also one of the few amateur astronomers in the US at that time, and had designed and built and patented the first turret telescope in 1910. We'll talk a little bit more about turret telescope later. In February of 1906, Porter had arranged for Anthony Fiala, the leader of his last Arctic expedition, that was the one that stranded him for 2.5 years, to include Springfield, Vermont in his lecture tour. Porter was the hometown boy, and he was present as part of the show to the packed house. And it was there that Harkness became aware of Porter's interest in astronomy and astronomical instruments. Sometime later, Porter received a bundle of popular astronomy magazines from Harkness, one of which contained an article entitled "Speculum Making," which caught his attention. This article by Leo Holcomb of Decatur, Illinois, stated that he had built and was using a 10.25-inch reflector. This inspired Porter to think, if this amateur can make his own telescope, so can I. Thus began an odyssey in which Porter became obsessed with learning the art of working glass and understanding the principles involved with optical instruments. He procured the English book entitled Glassworking by Paul Haslick and sent for the necessary glass discs and abrasives, built a workshop in his basement, and began creating mirrors. By the time he returned to Springfield, Vermont in 1919, he had completed a dozen or so telescope mirrors, most of which never got into telescopes. Harkness, recognizing the passion and talent with which Porter pursued this new hobby, continued to encourage him, and they kept up an active correspondence. By 1911, Porter had built a small observatory to house a 6-inch refractor, which was a gift from Harkness. The unique Harkness turret telescope, completed in 1910, was designed to observe while protected from the elements. I think you can all identify with that, especially whole winter observing. So that's why Harkness's turret telescope came to be. And it still exists, by the way. I have a picture of it here, I think, shortly. And this challenged Porter to think outside the box. So in 1913 and 14, Porter designed and built a telescope which he incorporated into his house, which was protected from elements, using two 16-inch glass discs, again furnished by Harkness. Porter wrote an article describing this telescope and his experiences with it, which was published in the May 1916 edition of Popular Astronomy, the first of many articles in that magazine. The creative interchanges between Porter and Harkness seemed to stimulate Porter's natural curiosity. He then became fascinated with the mechanical design of telescopes and their mountings. He began to use his engineering background to explore different configurations and options. An early example of this design work, completed in 1917 and published in Popular Astronomy and Scientific American in 1918, was a proposal for a new form of mounting for large reflecting telescopes. This yoke mount design would come back to have significance years later in bringing Porter into the Hale Telescope project. The creativity of alternative designs seemed a perfect match for Porter's fertile mind. As his skills in shaping glass mirrors developed, he began to experimenting with photographing the shadows that appear on mirrors during the knife edge test used to guide the critical shaping of the mirror surface. He was the first person ever to do so. In June of 1918, he had an article on this work published in the Astrophysical Journal, which is edited by George Ellery Hale. In appreciation of this important work, the French Astronomical Society offered him a membership in their organization. Porter, now 47 years old, had become a recognized expert in the design, fabrication, and testing of optical devices. In 1918, during World War I, Harkness, now supporting the war effort, persuaded Porter to go to Washington to work at the National Bureau of Standards, helping the country fill its military needs for optical instruments. After the war, Harkness, in one of his leadership roles in the machine tool industry, he was the chairman of the National Screw Thread Commission, saw a need for better means of standardization and quality control for screw threads. As an inventor himself, Harkness, with over 120 patents, had an idea that the requirements for inspection might be efficiently available by means of an optical device, which would greatly enlarge the image of a screw and comparing it to a desired standard. And so, in 1919, he brought the now 47-year-old Porter back to Springfield, Vermont, and hired him at Jones and Lamson as the practical optical man to turn this optical comparator idea into a reality. It took Harkness's and Porter's skill and talent several years to perfect this device, but through the years, this comparator would become one of J&L's major products. Porter set up an optical shop at J&L and trained workers in the skills of grinding and polishing lenses. His new job only increased his interest in telescope making and astronomy. Only now he had an opportunity to share it with others. He had always felt that professional instruments were out of reach for ordinary folks, but now he could teach them how to build their own. Thus, on August 17, 1920, Porter assembled the first group of 15 men and one woman, most of whom worked at J&L, in a room at the factory to learn the skills of telescope making. The first gathering of the Springfield telescope makers, which still exists today. He had arranged with Harkness to use an empty room at James and Lamson as a workshop to meet with on a regular basis. Porter had ordered the required glass discs and other materials and first instructed his class in the art of mirror making. They worked on their mirrors 2 or 3 nights a week, learning the various steps in grinding, polishing, and testing involved, all under the watchful eye and guidance of Porter. They were all amazed when he told them that they could make mirror surfaces that were 1,000 times more precise than the parts they were used to working on in their daily work, accurate to a fraction of the wavelength of light. All but one completed their mirrors, ranging from 4 to 10 inches in diameter. Porter then instructed them on the optical principles and mechanical requirements required to arrange other elements needed, structure, eyepiece, focuser, mount, and so on, into complete telescopes. He stressed that each person should use their own individual talents and imagination to construct their own personal instrument. Thus, the pattern maker might construct his scope out of wood, while the machinist could use metal. This use of imagination and talent, as we shall see, has survived at Stellafane for almost 100 years. Clever ingenuity, started by Porter, has become a competitive hallmark of this annual event. But the grinding of mirrors and building of mounts and finally telescopes quickly engendered other activities with a now growing group of interested amateurs. There were gatherings to discuss the wonders of the heavens and all-night observing sessions. Porter was an enthusiastic and inspiring teacher, exposing these men to the celestial geography and such notions as Greenwich time and right ascension, declination, ecliptic, and so on, and showing them how to find deep sky objects by star hopping and to locate the planets. He also gave them a smattering of surveying and the measurement of time, latitude, and longitude by using optical instruments. After they had been meeting on an informal basis for several years, it was agreed that a club should be formed, and on December 7th, 1923, the first official meeting of the Springfield Telescope Makers was held, with Porter elected president. The Constitution included a clause that required to become a Springfield telescope maker, a person must first make a mirror. The main topic of that first meeting included the building of a clubhouse, a project that had been started some months before, on a property known as Breezy Hill, just west of Springfield. Porter had inherited the land and donated to the club, along with a contribution of cash to get it started with construction. Under his architectural training, using his architectural training, he also furnished a design for the clubhouse. All the members of the club pitched in to build it, and when funds ran short, James Hartness furnished the needed additional backing. This clubhouse became the center of their activities for observing, meetings, and gathering for discussions. It was decorated with photographs of celestial objects, telescopes, and astro-related stuff. Shelves were added and a library of astronomy books was accumulated. A small kitchen was added later on with 2 bunk rooms upstairs for overnighters. By early 1924, the main part of the clubhouse was complete. And at a meeting on January 30th, Porter suggested that it be named Stellar Fane, meaning Shrine to the Stars, which was later contracted to Stellafane. On the north gable, one of the members carved the words, "The heavens declare the glory of God." During these years, Porter wrote many articles which were published in Popular Astronomy and other magazines. One of these articles caught the attention of Albert Ingalls, an editor for Scientific America, the most popular science magazine in America at that time. In the November 1921 issue, it was entitled, quote, "The Poor Man's Telescope." And in it, Porter described how he had made his own concave mirror and built a reflecting telescope from it. Ingalls also noticed the second article in March of 1923 relating how a group of Vermont villagers under Porter's instructions had made their own telescopes and became amateur astronomers. Inspired by these articles, Ingalls embarked on fabricating his own modest 6-inch mirror and soon found out that he needed practical advice. Thus, he personally contacted Russell Porter and became what would become an important relationship for the future of amateur astronomy in America. On the weekend of June 12th and 14th, 1925, Ingalls made his first of many visits to Stellafane. During this visit, while getting advice from Porter for his own mirror project, he also spent time with the Springfield telescope maker members at Breezy Hill, observing the heavens and talking enthusiastically about their homemade instruments. By the time he left on Sunday, he had decided that there was the basis for an article in Scientific American to discover how much interest there might already exist among its readers and how much could be created. With the assistance from Porter, he decided to write such an article, which appeared in the November 1925 issue of Scientific American. This article by Ingalls produced such an extraordinary response. There were 368 letters to the editor about this. Readers from all over the US and around the world wrote the editor of Scientific American, urging the publication of practical instructions for making telescopes such as the Vermont amateurs had made and used. There seemed to be a promising audience for such a specialized hobby. Ingalls then made a second trip to Vermont to gather more information and enthusiastically showed scores of these letters to Porter and the STM members. He then invited Porter to prepare 2 articles describing the designs for various telescopes, illustrated by the soon-to-become familiar Porter drawings. These 2 articles were published in Scientific American in February and March of 1926, and evoked such a response that every issue of the magazine thereafter, until 1948, or for 22 years, contained a section on telescopes and amateur astronomy. Now, I know none of you guys here are as old as I am, But I remember some of those. I was born in 37, so by the time they ended these articles in 48, I was like 11 years old, and I was an interested kid in astronomy. So I remember some of those articles. Although a few amateurs had been making telescopes for years, the craze was spreading. In anticipation of more articles, Porter was invited to become a corresponding editor for Scientific American. Engel's earlier research on books about amateur telescope making had revealed that there was only one book on the subject in the English language, and it was not published in the US, but in Northern Ireland. The amazing interest exhibited by the response to the Scientific American articles and the ready assistance and cooperation of Russell Porter prompted Ingalls to produce the first edition of what was to become the Bible for amateur telescope making. Amateur telescope making, that's the title. I have a copy of that up here if any of you would like to take a look through it. The first edition, published in late 1926, was a 102-page booklet entitled Amateur Telescope Making, which expanded to over 500 pages by the 24th printing of the fourth edition in 1980. Volume 1 contained many chapters written and profusely illustrated by Porter, as well as other contributors, and came to contain many photographs of telescopes built by amateurs around the world. This book was such an astounding commercial success that it was followed by two sequels, Volume 2 in 1937, Volume 3 in 1953, going into more advanced optical topics. The amateur movement had been ignited and created thousands of telescopes built by folks who often banded together to form hundreds of clubs around the country. These developments in 1920s and 1930s generated an interest and commercial incentive for the later emergence of commercially produced four-man telescopes in the 60s and 70s. Celestron and Meade came about because of the demand brought by these telescopes. Meanwhile, back in Springfield, Porter had been, as usual, cogitating. Since he had returned to Springfield, he had been thinking about a commercial telescope, one that would blend his talents in art, science, and engineering with his love of nature. The fruit of his creative mind was a telescope that would be as ornamental in a lawn or garden as it would be useful to observe the surrounding landscapes or studying celestial objects. The Porter Garden Telescope. This telescope is of a Newtonian design with its 6-inch f4 primary mirror, nestled in a bowl of bronze lotus leaves, which serves as its holder. From the side of the lotus bowl, a slender bronze leaf curves gracefully about 24 inches to a prism and eyepiece holder. Different eyepieces permitted magnifications of 25, 50, and 100. The mounting, disguised by more bronze lotus leaves, is a combination Altaz and equatorial design. All parts were cast out of statuary bronze, including the massive base into which were cast the names Kepler, Newton, Galileo. It could also be used as a sundial, a true functional work of art. Artists liked the idea and agreed to let Porter develop it for production by the Jones and Lamson Machine Company. As a commercial telescope, it was a flop. You could buy they were selling it for $400 to $500, and you could buy a Model T Ford at that time for $400 or $500. So it was a flop, although the company records have been lost and there's no record of how many garden telescopes were built or sold. But estimates range from 75 to over 200 that were sold for $500. Today, there are very few garden telescopes known to exist, but a Vermont company, Telescopes of Vermont, has produced an accurate reproduction. If you have or know of anybody that has one of these, by the way, if you go on Wikipedia, type in Porter Garden Telescope, you'll see there's a list of all the known ones that exist around the world. There's like 5 of them that they know about, but they think there are other ones out there. And one of them sold for, I think I put up there for $21,000 a few years ago. By 1926, Porter and the Springfield telescope maker members decided that since their movement had begun to catch on, and that there were other amateurs out there forming clubs and building telescopes, that it would be fun to invite them to Springfield for a weekend to exchange ideas and compare experiences and to observe in the dark skies on Breezy Hill. Thus, on the weekend of July 3rd and 4th, 1926, the first Stellafane convention was held, a modest affair with some 20 participants, mostly from New England and New York, but with one from as far away as Virginia. They spent the daytime comparing telescopes, talking about mirror-making mounts and the like. At night, they looked at the heavens and under very dark Vermont skies. The gathering was the highlight of the year for the Springfield telescope makers and the start of a tradition that is now almost 100 years old. Stellafane, the event. It now draws more than 1,000 amateurs from around the country and around the world once a year to Breezy Hill. Stellafane, the event, was an ongoing part of Porter's life for over 20 years until his death, and his spirit lives on still in the activities of the Springfield telescope makers and that annual event, an annual gathering. But now, yet another individual was to play a significant role in the shaping of the rest of Porter's life. George Ellery Hale. Hale was, as many of you know, the giant of astronomy in the 20th century. In that he was not only a noted solar astronomer in his own right, but he was responsible for facilitating a revolution in the study of the cosmos by establishing several major observatories and building successively the 4 largest telescopes in the world and staffing them with notable astronomers such as Edwin Hubble and Alan Sandage and the like. Porter had first caught Hale's attention in 1918 when he published the first photos of the shadows on mirrors during the knife edge test in the Astrophysical Journal, edited by Hale. Porter had then further became known by Hale in 1927 when Porter requested the plans for a spectroheliograph, which had been invented by Hale. Hale had in turn become aware of Porter's articles on telescope making in Scientific America and in the ATM book. In early 1928, Ingalls arranged a dinner for the 3 of them, for Porter, Ingalls, and Hale in New York City, in which Porter impressively shared his ideas with Hale about large telescopes, illustrating them with quick sketches on napkins, the menu, and any other piece of paper handy. After an interview in Springfield with several of Hale's associates, Porter received a telegram from Hale dated November 17, 1928, asking him to come to California and join the team being assembled to construct what would become the largest telescope in the world, the 200-inch Hale telescope at Mount Palomar in California. Porter's humility was tested. This now 56-year-old self-taught amateur telescope maker and former Arctic explorer was being asked to join the largest and most ambitious telescope project in history. So Porter moved to California. Hale had just received a $6 million grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to build a 200-inch telescope. He now had to figure out how to do it and was building a team to do just that. Porter would spend the next 20 years of his life with profound contributions to this endeavor. His title in the organization was, quote, Associate in Optics and Instrument Design, end of quote. But his activities were wide-ranging, involving site selection, surveying architectural layouts and building designs, designing and building ancillary telescopes and instruments and the like. Porter's major contributions, though, probably were to help Hale's team team of engineers and scientists visualized the many problems in designing a massively complex device, which required sometimes ingenious solutions. Throughout the 20-year program, it was often one of Porter's more than 1,000 magnificent drawings or sketches, which allowed educated designs and decisions to be made, many times before the expensive hardware had been produced. Many of these drawings were cutaways, a skill that Porter was a master of. He had the uncanny skill of producing extremely accurate perspective drawings of complex mechanisms before or while they're being made. As an aside, a personal and local example of this talent is shown in this Porter drawing, which was produced in 1936 of the Tower 2 at the McMath-Hulbert Observatory in Lake Angeles, only 70 miles from here. Robert McMath had been consulting George Ellery Hale concerning the design and construction of that building. And sometime during the process, Porter made this drawing, which reveals this complex structure in amazing details, as any of you who have been out there can attest to. Porter's specific involvements in the Hale Scope project are too numerous to recount, but as a key member of the team and a close confidant of Hale's until Hale's death in 1938, some of the more notable contributions are noted in these slides. Porter personally did the planning and designs for the 3 initial buildings on the Caltech campus: the astrophysics lab, the machine shop, and the optical shop, all very large and very complicated buildings. Porter participated in the site selection process at locations throughout the Southwest and designed the telescopes used in this process. 10 of them were built. They were 4-inch refractors with 750 times magnification. Once Mount Palomar was selected as a site of the new observatory, Porter went out to the uninhabited plateau and camped alone in a tent for days. With his surveying equipment, proceeded to lay out the plans for all of the future buildings, including the observatory itself and the monastery. Major engineering challenge for this massive telescope was, what type of mounting system should it have? The final split yoke or horseshoe design adopted was an adaptation of a proposal by Porter in an article in the March 1918 issue of Popular Astronomy entitled, a quote, new form of mounting for large reflectors, end of quote. And it was later used in his garden telescope. Porter went back east most summers to visit his old friends and attend the Stellafane gatherings. He would regale them with reports on the progress of the 200-inch telescope. During these visits, Hale asked Porter to visit various suppliers involved with the program to assess the status of their work. Because of his comprehensive knowledge of all aspects of the project, Porter's reports back to Hale were valuable inputs to the program. After the delivery of the huge 200-inch, 17.5-ton mirror in 1936, Porter became involved with the Herculean job of creating the proper paraboloid surface and the testing protocols required inside of the massive optical shop that Porter had designed some 6 years earlier. This process would take more than 10 years. This was kind of interrupted by World War II. To house the enormous telescope, Porter designed a classical dome exterior with a very functional interior design, which included dark rooms, a kitchenette, a recoding chamber, and the like, but also a glassed-in observation deck for visitors to view operations. How many of you have ever been out to Palomar? Quite an interesting place.
I'll just make a comment. Walking up and seeing that dome, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Right, you got it. And that was Porter's design. All right. But in the final analysis of Porter's contributions, one must come back to his visual drawings, sketches, and models. He was also a skilled model maker with his own space in the machine shop. These visual cues efficiently resolved many issues during the 20-year program. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and the U.S. entered World War II, the staff at Caltech, along with Porter, now 70 years old, joined the war effort. Porter's talents as an illustrator were widely utilized on weapons designs and training materials, and he was widely recognized as the cutaway drawing man. However, another important contribution was more in line with his avocation. As America was gearing up for production for war, Porters and Ingalls recognized that a shortage existed in the ability to supply a critical optical component for anti-aircraft and field gun systems, as well as other optical applications. The Amici prism, or the roof prism, a difficult-to-craft precision optic for producing erect images. They were joined in this concern by a Porter ATN from Fred Pearson from Mississippi, and dubbed themselves the Three Musketeers. At the 1941 Stellophane gathering, these Three Musketeers were able to recruit some 80 telescope-making nuts to join what was called the Amici Gang. The Three Musketeers collaborated in producing a book of instructions as to how to make and test Amici prisms, or roof prisms, and acted as the liaison between the Amici Gang and the Frankfurt Arsenal, the government agent. This arrangement supplied 28,420 roof prisms at a critical time, or critical 10% of the requirements during the early years of World War II. During the war years, the Stellophane Convention was discontinued. When resumed in 1946, Porter traveled east, eager to see his old friends at Breezy Hill. Another affair, however, awaited him in Northfield, Vermont, when he was honored by the Norwich University, where he had been a student on for 1 year in 1889 and 90. He was given a Doctor of Science degree to honor his lifetime of contributions to society. Another honoree at this same ceremony was Dwight David Eisenhower, who was the big hero of World War II, of course. Porter then once again visited with his old telescope friends from around the country and Canada at the Stellophane Conference, where he gave everybody an update on the final phases of the Hale Telescope Mount Palomar project. After the convention, he left again for California. It would be his last trip to Breezy Hill. Although semi-retired, he still maintained his office and participated in bringing the 200-inch telescope online. He participated in the final testing of the optics and was one of the few participants in the entire program to get a visual peek through the giant telescope in the summer of 1948. He sent a letter back to his friends at Stellophane with regrets at not being with him, but then he reported on his view through the Hale telescope. I was looking at the Hercules cluster, M13, the other night at Cody Focus with a power of 900. The stars in the center were completely separated and so bright as to only require a few seconds of photographic exposure. By February of 1949, Porter was back in California working on a 6-inch achromatic objective in his basement. On February 26, after several visits by friends, he was stricken by several heart attacks and died. Thus, 78 years of age ended a life well lived, and he summed it up in his own words in a letter to a friend. Nothing gives me more satisfaction than realizing that I have helped toward giving thousands of people the pleasure of creating with their own hands a tool to unlock the wonders of the heavens. Beyond those profound sentiments, though, Russell Porter was indeed a man of many dimensions. So now I'd like to honor Russell Porter in my usual presentation fashion with a song. This year's tune is a rewritten version of Paul McCartney's song Let It Be from the Beatles' fantastic library. Sing along if you'd like. You all know the melody, I'm sure. You'll have to excuse, I can't stand up and hold a guitar anymore. It's kind of one of the penalties of becoming older. When I think of Russell Porter, a man of great diversity, he first was an explorer who craved more to see. And in his Arctic ventures, he learned lots about astronomy, how to use the instruments that let him see, let him see, let him see, let him even better see. He mapped the Arctic space with scopes that let him see. When Porter looked up at stars in heaven, thoughts of ingenuity gave plans to help his friends build scopes better see. At Stellafane, he formed a club whose membership would always be folks who could break mirrors that for scopes to let them see. Let them see. Let them see things that they had never seen. With their homemade telescopes, he showed them how to better see. Then he went to California to build a scope of great immensity. Hale's Palomar behemoth with Porter's ingenuity. For more than 40 years, it was the largest scope in history. 200 inches wide, so you could really better see. Let them see. Let them see, let them even farther see. From the smallest to the largest, order, let them see. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah. You know how that scope actually worked?
What?
Do you know how that actually worked?
The Hale telescope?
House, the one that he built into his house.
Oh, apparently it worked well enough for his experience. He wrote this article for the magazine where he described how comfortable it was and how neat it was and so on and so forth. I don't think it had the versatility that some other telescopes might, but some of you may know, if you've ever been out to Stellafane, that he many years later constructed a second turret telescope, which is now on the National Registry of Historic Places, and I have a slide with that. This is the Porter telescope. And Tom and I were out to Stellafane in 2013. We actually sat inside of the dome there. They were projecting the sun on a big white disc, probably 12-inch circle of the sun from that telescope. And it essentially the primary mirror is actually the secondary in this mirror. The image comes in from the sun to a flat. It's projected down to the primary mirror and then back into the telescope. So One other thing, while I've shown this thing here, you might be aware of the fact that there is a crater on the moon named for Russell Porter. So next time you're out there looking at the moon, try to find it. Any other questions? Thank you.
I'm sorry, for everybody having a film, but I don't say any, so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Charlie, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Norbert. I've had the pleasure of sitting in that room as well in the Porter Turret Telescope, and it's a really cool device. You have multiple people sitting there looking at the same object projected in front of you. And Breezy Hill is a magical place to be with a telescope.
Yeah, again, if any of you have never been to Stellafane, Porter's Spirit is just runs through that place. And on Saturday mornings, that's next to the last day of the convention out there, there's a competition. And the primary criteria for the competition is how ingenious are these telescopes. They'll have maybe 50 or 100 telescopes that display all sorts of ingenuity about designs of mounts and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, the iconic pink clubhouse is cool too.
Yep. Okay. So do you have any more talks, Jim?
no, I mean, if you've never been to Stellafane, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And it really is.
The other telescope is actually 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. They have the original Harkness. Oh, I think it's still on. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's still at Harkness House, and we actually were inside of that one too.
And, but they don't let you take the route to get into the scope anymore, do they? And they didn't let us.
I don't know. Yeah, 2013. The tunnel, you mean the tunnel? Yeah, we went through that. There's a museum, there's a museum of amateur telescopes. Well, actually amateur and professionals, including one of the garden telescopes. That's in that little museum in the tunnel going over to the.
There, for some reason, the tunnel was shut down. Yeah. That's what everybody.
Anyhow, if you're into astronomy or telescopes or instruments, Stellafane is one place you should not ever miss because there's so much available out there. It's a actually huge facility. They have a program of presentations there and at least 4 major telescopes on that property, including the turret telescope.
If I may add too, the guest speaker that we got to hear when I was there was some guy named Clyde Tombaugh about his discovery of a planet called Pluto. So I got to meet Clyde, got an autographed picture from him there, and he had passed away shortly afterwards, unfortunately. And then time before that, I met some other guy named Roland Christian, who was boasting about his triplet lens refractors that he was going to build.
Yeah, one of the regulars there is Al Nagler.
Yes, yeah.
And they had a project going when we were there, a mirror disc, I think it was 16-inch mirror disc that was in process that had been donated by John Dobson earlier and started by him. And they take it out every year to the Stellafane conference, and everybody gets an opportunity to give 2 or 3 strokes on it. I don't know that it'll ever get finished because it's better attraction to the.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing, we had a 4-outlet plug plugged into the Porter Turret Telescope building. Some guys plugged into ours, then other guys plugged into theirs, and more guys plugged into that. Before you know it, there were probably about 20 telescopes plugged into this one outlet.
Charlie, you said something about McMath Hulbert. I don't know how many of you have been out to McMath Hulbert. Yeah. anyhow, Tom and I are both members of the board of direction of the McMath-Hulbert Astronomical Society. We've been kicked out of the place for the last 3 years, but we're still working on our mission statement, which is to preserve and to promote that facility as a national treasure. And we have completed an application to the National Registry of Scientific Places, which is now at the state level. And we're waiting for action on that right now. Mr. Kinsler, the guy who owns the place, is still intransigent and has not allowed us back in the place, and keeps telling us that he would like to sell it, but he never has taken an action on it. We've kind of presented him, we've presented him with a number of good options, we think, but so, go ahead.
Since you guys, has it not been declared like a story? They can't tear it down. Is
Well, that's part of one of the restrictions on the deed that McMath left with it. But it's sitting there right now with no one taking care of it. It's, as you know, it was started in 1930. Actually, your telescope your observatory came there in 1958, as I understand it, from Tower 1 with the original tower there.
I think they were working on it, started building in 59, I think it was 59. Then he finished that. The open house, that 24-inch was at Lake Angeles. It was in October 1940. I got one of the papers I got from them.
Yeah, right.
And that's, they had the open house and everything. So,
It was actually named after Francis McMath, who was Robert McMath's father.
yeah, still got the play down there.
You guys operate it regularly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not the open house? It's good use.
Yeah.
In any event, we will keep you posted if there's any new developments come about. There was a major article in the Detroit News about 2 months ago, 3-page article about the observatory and what's going on out there and so on.
But it's without anybody out there even doing basic maintenance.
As far as we know, yeah. I live about 2 miles from it, and I drive by it every other week just to see what's going on.
On YouTube, there's a couple of TV reports, a couple of TV channels saw the paper article, and they went out and interviewed Mr. Kinsler, that place. You might put that up on YouTube.
How old is he?
It's 85.
1 year younger than I. He's 87. Thank you again.
Sir, if you got any more?
No, I have probably 4 or 5 more. Yeah, get back with me sometime.
Of open days next year.
Get back with me, Charlie.
I will.
Okay.
Put down buttons here. Here.
Okay. So, for officer reports, I've got a couple of things. We had an officer meeting for the first time in a long time. We were way overdue, actually, last night. And it was actually pretty productive. It took us a couple hours and we got a lot done. I'm just going to do a real brief overview because we're going to publish minutes on it and you'll get all the details anyway. And some of us probably will have more detail when they do the report. So basically, the first item is we talked about the webmaster duties because Jeff, since he's been on the online coordinator, has absorbed a lot of work and a lot of duties kind of piled on top of each other. And then in addition to that, our webmaster, Krishna, because of his profession, has not been able to really help us much for several years now. I mean, we really appreciate him. He did a lot of work and still occasionally does some updates, but we just can't reasonably expect him to become more active at this point. we have had conversations with Chris and he realizes this and has even said that if we just plain come up with a new webmaster, he is certainly okay with that. And we decided that is what that we really should do. So we are officially starting now looking for a new webmaster, somebody that knows how to do web pages. And somebody's got to be a club member. So if you don't volunteer, we'll come looking for you. And we might literally do that because it occurred to us last night. Brian reminded us that when he did the survey about, has that been a year maybe already? So anyway, one of the questions there was about helping out with the club. And apparently there were several people that actually said they'd be willing to help with our webpage. So we have a list perhaps. So you can either volunteer or we'll go after the list. Anyway, the second thing is we discussed the frequency of our newsletter. There has been some problem over the years, really, just getting enough content and in time to really put a whole newsletter together. And we'd had some discussion, actually, maybe even not doing the newsletter, but we decided, no, it's a valuable asset. We still think it has value. So then it became, do we need to do it as frequently? And what we decided is that we don't have to specify a frequency, really. The bylaws just describe the newsletter, but they don't mention anything about how often we have to do it. So the decision there was we're just going to let whoever happens to be the newsletter editor do that at their discretion. So if they can do it monthly, fine. If they don't have enough articles, and we'll still keep the same deadlines for the publication, but if there's not enough content, we'll just wait until we do have enough. Unless there's some big thing we want to put in there, in which case we had enough content. So anyway, that's how we're going to approach that. We also have some Night Sky Network award pins. We actually got 2 years worth of them here. And we decided, this is always a tough decision because we'd like to give them to everybody, frankly. But these are really intended for public outreach mostly. We kind of temper that a little bit with how much they've been a club participant, but with the lean toward things that have to do with public outreach. And we did come up with several names, and this is why I asked these people to be here. They couldn't all be here, but some of them are. And they would be actually, well, I guess the only ones that are here are you, Ken, and Doug Nell. I know you're thinking why, right? Because you've organized a lot of little impromptu observing sessions. You've been very active with different things. And I don't know if you've ever got one of these, and if you have, it's been a long time. So we thought you're very deserving of it. So. What's that?
You know. Said we
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, we have 2 different ones here for the 2 years. You can take your pick.
The other thing I noticed during the meeting and all that is like you've been contributing to our daily solar reports, whether it be.
Yes. Yep.
That was.
Well,
You mean you actually were able to retire? I figure I'm going to retire when they drag my body away. Anyway, as obviously Ken Cook was one of the winners, Doug Nell. The other ones we decided were John Wallbank, Amy, our newsletter editor, Gary Nichols, and Matthew West. So we'll have to track them down and somehow get those pins to them. So next thing is we had discussed doing more social media outreach. We don't really have a good footprint out there, so to speak. And Dimitri is going to head up doing some, we think, massive improvements that way. And he unfortunately just had to leave. So if he comes back, we'll get some more detail if he wants to give us. But again, if not, we're going to have it in the minutes anyway. But over the summer, while he's back up here from school, he's going to work on Facebook, X, and Twitter, Instagram, and see if we can't get more presence on those, including, and here he comes just in time, a video. How timely. Could you just briefly describe what your enhancements social media wise?
absolutely. Just putting ourselves out there for the younger folks who don't necessarily look at the website. Yeah, look at all that stuff, right? So.
Get out before the rain comes too. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Great again.
Then posting more content on the social medias. Pretty much it. And then I, of course, be willing to do that.
Photos, Instagram, articles.
Yes. So articles. Yes, articles, Facebook. So let's say you wanted something in the newsletter, well, we can take the newsletter stuff, copy and paste that to X, whatever, Facebook, and then for the Instagram, that's really a photo centric app. Let's say some of you asked your photographers, take a really nice photo and you want that posted on the Instagram. Well, let's put that on the Instagram. That's pretty much all I got.
Thank you, Dimitri. Is that your officer report too, or do you have?
Yes.
Okay. Just for later, it makes it efficient. Got it. Okay, another thing, we covered the Sea Star. Basically, that was just a matter of, is the method we've got for tracking who has it sufficient? We decided it is. It's really part of a tracking system we had for loaner equipment anyway. We also want to remind people that we do have various telescopes that people can loan. And in fact, if you really want to borrow our Club Sea Star, it is sitting right there available as we speak. With just a matter of, I got to know who it is, and so we can put you in the log. But you can walk away with it tonight.
How long I can keep it?
Months.
I think we had some kind of a guideline that wasn't really that long, but I'm glad you brought that up, because we thought about, I forget your name.
Josh.
Yeah, Josh, I think was going to have it what?
Well, Amy said a week.
Oh, is that? Well, I don't think we were that restricted.
But,
Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah. So I guess the way we looked at it,
In June,
mhm,
so I want an opportunity to sort of spread some light. Michigan, and we.
right. Yeah. Don? Oh, I'm sorry.
Talk to somebody later in June, I guess, that's the thing.
Well, I would say,
Could take it now. And
yeah,
unless we don't, it doesn't appear that people looking to borrow.
right.
So 2 months is probably not, admittedly during the summer. But you're only talking half at this point, right?
Yeah.
A month and a half would be through the end of June, right?
Right.
And hope. It does work less than optimal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you could be amazed what that thing will leave one of the full moon. Yeah. But as far as how long you can have it, we finally decided that we're going to kind of make that indefinite. We'd like to see various members have their chance to be able to use it. But on the other hand, it's better that somebody is using it or has the possibility of using it than just sitting someplace waiting. So I guess it's basically kind of open as far as how long you get to keep it. So
if there was other people.
exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Then we'd say, well.
Right.
Soon.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. Thanks for adding that, Ken. Don.
I think the thing to do is to work with Ethan Cantu.
Yeah.
And say, let's get that. Yep.
But if you want to take it, just give me your info before we get out of the meeting. Okay, you are a club member officially. Okay, cool. Yep. Just get that and I'll go ahead and put it in the log for you. Let's see, what else did we have? Oh, as far as doing any update on instructions or anything, we are going to do that. Actually, Jeff is going to modify the instructions, go with it a little bit, because he's got the S30 now. He's had some experience with it. And we did realize that maybe we could give a little better instructions on connecting to it based on Ken's report that our last open house, 2 people brought Sea Stars and neither one of them could connect to it, which we thought was really odd, but he's got some ideas why, and I think maybe he's right. So we thought maybe a little more instruction in that for people, you know, using ours, it would help. So, yeah, so we're gonna add to that a little bit. We had a brief discussion about the possibility of Wi-Fi up on Peach Mountain. As Jack had reported before, the U of M approached us about doing this. There was some discussion back and forth, and now everything has gone quiet. So that could be that they just stalled out and they're not interested anymore. But then Don brought up the obvious. There's nothing really stopping us from getting a little Verizon 5G box and sticking it out there. We do have much better cell phone signal out there than we had years ago, especially Verizon. It's not that expensive. The club could certainly afford to have that account, you know, and pay it every month, and we'd have Wi-Fi. So he's gonna look into that for us and see about the practicality of it, in which case we'd have Wi-Fi up there. And the really big news, we have yet another club telescope. This one's off the charts. As some of you may know, Stan Watson, long-term club member. Also, I believe he's the gentleman that was sharing the observatory that Brian Odom had out in New Mexico, his remote-controlled observatory. So Stan is a very, very avid astrophotographer. Has got, I don't know how many telescopes really, but one of those is a ZWO 107 millimeter f7 telescope on a ZWO AM5, I think they call it, mount, tripod, the whole thing. Brian has estimated it's worth approximately $6,000, and he is going to give it to us. The only thing asked in return is a letter with our letterhead on it, stating what the value is, I assume because he wants to get a tax write-off. In fact, I think we should go further. We should write some letter, give him recognition for that kind of donation to us. So,
Give them some merch.
yeah.
Is our organization fully, whatever with the IRS?
No, and I thought about that later too.
See, you're the 5. Since we're donating it to the band.
No, they're donating it to us.
Yeah,
I don't think it matters. No. We're still nonprofit.
right. But there is something, because I think we're a C7,
Yes.
and I think maybe you have to be a C5 for somebody to claim that deduction.
You can't give that.
I mean, we could give him the letter. It's just because it wouldn't be on us. It would be a matter of whether he could legally do it.
We.
Yeah.
Do we want to?
Well,
Right.
Yeah.
He will not get an IRS credit.
that's on, we'll double check with Doug Scoble, but I think that is the case. I don't think we're the right C type organization.
That's.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff just put up pictures of our new baby there. Yeah, well, that's true. We shouldn't let him know that, yeah. Right, okay, yeah. Does anybody have his, probably, maybe Brian should do that. Yeah, yeah. No.
Yeah. Trying to go the IRS. People look at him, so. Think like to this. So there's
Does it, would it?
Okay,
people will donate to it.
Yeah. Would it cause any
It's a big thing. But
all right.
really, I don't.
Anyway, that was it for my report on the officers meeting. Just a couple other things. We have 2 open houses coming up next week and the week after, 24th and 31st. We did come up with an open house coordinator for the 31st, but we don't have anybody for the 24th, which is not tomorrow, but next Saturday. So we're going to start looking for an open house coordinator for that.
So,
That's true. Also true. That might be a convenient time for just enough cloudiness. Yeah, exactly. And then also the week after that, I believe, we have a Friday night event at Westland Library. Yeah, I don't think is there an open house after? No, there wouldn't, because that'd be 3 in a row. So, yeah. Anyway, so I'll be looking for people for that event also. That's all I've got, so I'll turn it over to Ken, who is once again doing the minutes for us. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have a report.
Well, that was quick. Thank you. Excellent job. Let's see, Doug is not online, is he? Or guy with the money? Jack. Hmm. Okay.
Thing I can say is just getting the observatory ready for our open houses, taking care of everything out there, so. Put it on your. Look open, that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Check. There.
Here, yeah. At the officers meeting, we kind of went through first order of business, going through a lot of the web tasks that we had. And I tried to clean it up and consolidate some things and basically mark things were things to do, filled. So I'm going to skip down to some of these things have already been filled. So like the backend support, I'll continue to do that, publications and such. Adrian and Dimitri are kind of doing this thing. Dimitri obviously is going to be going off to school in the fall, so we'll need somebody else to take up the mantle.
Well, I'm gonna get
There.
you hear me better at home? The meeting tech is basically setting up this stuff here, and there's you notice the banner out there in the lobby. It's a minor thing, but it's yet another chore to do. So if there's somebody who wants to do that, those are things. Anything marked in red is kind of things where we're looking for some more help. The public announcements, I guess this is the lobby banners here too. I did that twice. I also do, for the meetings, I do a 5-minute log of attendance and all that, so we can kind of see, well, do people tune out with our meetings, or do they actually stick around? And those have been useful in figuring that out, just taking a attendance every 5 minutes or so. And that's where those graphs come from the newsletter. And then the banner. This member management, this is something I don't know if you're aware of it happens, but in the M community is like a directory for all of our email lists. Me and anybody who with a U of M unique name can edit that and modify that. So right now it's me, I think Kurt Hillig, Dave has got and there's a handful of people that still have U of M IDs that can take care of that. The other thing that Doug Scoble takes care of is the WordPress user accounts, which allow you to log into the website and get the members only information. So he kind of manages that along with all the membership stuff. It makes sense for him to do that. I kind of saved the best for last up at top because this is kind of the most squishy, weirdest part, because we're kind of looking for more WordPress content and people to help out managing that site. There's a whole lot of things we could be doing it. WordPress isn't that hard to operate, but you kind of have to have a feel for how everything's organized and the way to do things. One of the things I do is all the stuff that comes by in our photos is they go into the photo galleries up online. So from our email list, those all go up there. We've got a content that changes all the time, meeting announcements, some of the photo stuff. It'd be nice to have maybe a gallery of all the member stuff, a gallery of all the stuff people are doing with e-scopes, having it right on the front page. And
The stock in the folder.
yes, this doc is in the communications committee folder. And then one of the big projects that Jack I've been kind of lax in getting it all there, is to move all the stuff from youngastronomer.org over to the new WordPress site. We've got skeletal pieces there, but it just takes a little bit of horsepower for people to move the content over.
And it's not hard, it's just, it's kind of time consuming. You got to pay attention to formatting and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, anything that's missing from our existing UMISH site has to be moved over before ITS pulls the plug at some point in the future. There's lots of scritching and writing on the wall saying this is going to happen, but we've got no firm dates. But yet we are literally the last non-university organization to have a website on their servers. So it will happen sometime. And I think we've got a really great start with the WordPress site, but it takes time to go through every single link and follow all the historical things. I do have a backup of it in case it evaporates completely, and then we can sort through individual files, but I'd rather not do that. It's easier to navigate what's current, if you will. So, some helper people to do that. I can certainly help guide people, but it's kind of overwhelming for me right now. So word is going to go out probably in a little more formal public way to the general membership list that we're going to need some help on some of this stuff. But this is the basic outline of the tasks. Many of them are already there, and officers and members are helping out. But with this web thing, there's a lot of details to move. So I just wanted to get that up because that was probably a half hour of our hour and a half meeting last night, is discussing all these different points and what needs to go where. So, but. And if there's anything, if you want to help Amy out, or if you want to, become newsletter, I'm sure, she'd be happy to shift over responsibility. So, and, really any of this stuff, anybody can do, none of it's hard, but if somebody else wants to get involved in, running the club, say the word and we will help you get started and, pass it off. I think that's the bulk of my stuff.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. Who do we have up on Zoom? Any officers? No. No. Okay. Does anybody have anything else?
Charlie, may I interject just a couple of quick things? Norbert here. Jeff, from a technical standpoint, when people are in the audience their audio clips in and out without that microphone nearby, just so you know.
Okay, so the room microphone isn't as effective.
No, it's very annoyingly clipping in and out. We get about half of what people say.
Got it.
We'll keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah. It looks like the club's pretty busy, especially next weekend, but I was just going to mention that Kevin Daney at Delta College, they're having an open house either Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday night, depending on the weather, at the 0.7 meter. The new Delta College plane wave telescope will be open to the public, but that's about an hour and a half drive up 23 to get there. But just thought I'd put that out there.
Where was that again, Norb?
That's the Delta College Delta Dome, they call it. The 28-inch plane wave scope that they've got there is going to be open to the public.
Delta College is in Saginaw or Bay
Yeah,
City,
it's on Saginaw. It's
okay.
M84 up there between Saginaw and Bay City. Like I said, about an hour and a half drive up the freeway. But if you're interested in seeing it or happen to be up that way, they'd be happy to see people.
Thank you. Anything else?
I think the only thing I really have is I did bring my C-Star S30, the white one that's on the desk there for people who want to take a look at it real quick. The club's S50 is in the big black box. If anybody hasn't seen an S30, I got one here and it's open. And it's taken some spectacular pictures. I have some photo galleries, some samples too.
Anybody have anything else? In that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Support? Anybody opposed? Okay, we're out of here. Thank you.